Lux Occult is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.
3, roll, 2, 4, Yankee, Romeo, 7, Bravo, Delta, Quebec, Oscar.
I have been a fortune teller. Ages ago, I told the fortunes of buffoons and madmen. You remember, I had a small voice like a grain of sand and enormous hands. Madmen walked over my hands. I told them the truth. I could never lie to them. And now I am sorry. Ages ago, a drunkard filled with dreams asked me to dance. I used my cards to tell his fortune when his drinks became blows. My banging on the door killed the sea. Memories finished us. Madmen and buffoons count the grains of sand and have never destroyed the night's dreams. They draw up the night and rise, filled with middays. Magicians were and always will be my companions. Without guessing their tricks, I started fire in their throats, but none explode. Maybe one. And with the fish, another chimera rises. That is I Have Been a Fortune Teller by Giannia Barashi. Hello and welcome to Lux Occult. This is the podcast where we gleefully taunt the mundane, butcher the Latin and most other languages, and we also discuss a variety of occult and esoteric topics, exploring the intersections of magic, science, art, philosophy, technology, and so much more through the lens of chaos magic. This is occultism for everyone. I'm your host, Lux Strata, and if you're hearing the sound of my voice right now, that means that this show, and magic for that matter, are for you, if you want them. There are a lot of different ways to be more free in the world, and using magic or making space for a spiritual practice in your life can be one of them. As always, I don't speak for anyone but myself. Others can, will, and should disagree with the things that I say sometimes, or the things that my guests say, or the things that you hear or read or whatever. And how we ever learn anything if we were all in agreement on all things at all times after all. And like those who attempt to be reasonable should be willing to do, I often revise my opinions based on new evidence. Alright, stoked to bring you a great conversation I had with Erika Robinson, author of The Language of Lenormand. We will hear the inspiring story about Erika getting into the practice of reading Lenormand and writing her book, which is the first on the topic written by an American, as well as creating her deck, the Lenormand of Hope. We'll talk about how Lenormand is different from other cartomancy systems, the most popular here in the US being Tarot, of course. And we'll also do a little bit of myth-busting about the deck's origins. Erika shares about how Lenormand is perhaps more of a linguistic system of divination than a pictorial one, and what that means for the person using it. We'll also get into some ethical considerations about reading for third parties or, using your cards to spy on people or whatever. And Erika will share about how she handles these types of situations with clients. The idea of different divination systems being able to have conversations with one another comes up as well. This is the way that Erika chooses what she will write about for her blog on Substack, and we're going to hear about that a little bit later. I found this particularly interesting because this is something that I've played around with a little bit and almost sort of used some systems as scaffoldings for understanding others, though I'm not sure that that's always a useful or wise strategy. A lot of systems have enough difference that might just cause more confusion. But anyway, there's a lot of great practical advice in today's episode about divining with Lenormand, and it's provided by someone who spent a lot of time both as a reader of Lenormand and other systems and as an educator, so the information is not only useful but presented in a lucid and easy to understand way, which is not always easy when talking about, esoteric things. So whether you're totally new to reading Lenormand, I feel like I've been saying that word a lot, or have been reading it for years like me, Erika's work is a valuable resource, and I'm really stoked to have gotten the chance to talk with her and to present our conversation to you all. During a break, I'll share a few tidbits, including a short little impromptu chat I had about astrology with a friend of mine at Chelsea as I was testing out some new audio equipment I got. And I'll share some updates about what we have going on with the Green Mushroom Project and Void House, our new experiment in creating a consent-forward magical space. So we've got lots of good stuff to get into here today, but before we go any further, I should remind you that if you like the show and the other work I've been getting into, you can support it on Patreon. If you do so, you can take a bibliomancy break with me, in which I will read from my bibliomancy oracle for you and send you an MP3. And there are no tiers or levels or whatever, so give as you will. Buy me a coffee is an option for those who wish to show their support with a one-time donation and don't want to do the whole Patreon rigmarole. Thank you so much to everybody who is already supporting the show in whatever way works for you. This literally makes it possible by allowing me to cover the expenses associated with making it, thereby justifying to myself the time that I spend in production and other things. I really appreciate the opportunity to be making this thing and to have the resources necessary to reach you all today. So many thanks for the support, which is making this possible. Gratitude. So I'm pretty introverted and I don't use social media very much due to this. I'm not there all the time checking on things or anything like that, but that certainly doesn't mean that I don't want to hear from you. I'm beyond lucky to have such amazing listeners, collaborators, cohorts, co-conspirators, etc. I always welcome people's thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, or arcane revelations. You can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com, or you can get me on Instagram at luxoccultpod. Okay, so there's this Aleister Crowley quote, which people in some circles are pretty into. I'll paraphrase it here. People, when they're doing their true will have the momentum of the universe behind them. So although I have a complex philosophical relationship with this idea of a true will, a true magical will, and with many other ideas in Thelema besides that, it's actually recently been suggested to me by a Thelemite that I might be too thelemic for Thelema. Still trying to puzzle that one out, which is likely a waste of time. I'm just now realizing as I say this. Anyway, regardless of what we think about all of that true will stuff, in the story we will hear today about how Erika Robinson came to write her book, The Language of Lenormand, there is a distinct sense of things sort of falling into place in a way that seems really organic and natural. There's a sort of feel of the momentum of the universe perhaps being behind her. I have no clue if this is what the experience actually felt like, and definitely wouldn't presume to guess what the actual case is in an ontological way or whatever, but there's a sense of Erika being aware and doing exactly what she needed to be doing to create this very cool and useful book, Language of Lenormand, and her Lenormand deck, Erika's Lenormand of Hope. We'll hear more about that later. All right, I'll be back to share my chat with Chelsea about astrology and give you an update about what we have going on with Green Mushroom Project and Void House, as well as to announce the release of a new Astral Temple meditation. But now, let's get into it here. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of awesome practical information in today's conversation, presented by someone with a depth of experience in both divination and education. So, class is once more in session here on the Lux Occult podcast as we dive into the first part of my chat with Erika Robinson.
This is the train to Hartford. The next station is Reading.
All right, well, my guest today is Erika Robinson. Erika, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to get into your book, The Language of Lenormand, and the cards themselves. I'm a huge fan of the Lenormand deck. I've been playing with it for about, 5 years or so. So I like to start out by asking guests to provide some sort of general context about themselves, like whatever you would like the listeners to know about yourself and your practice and everything before we get into the Lenormand and the book.
Okay, well, I live in Southern California as of about 2 years ago. Love it here. I was originally from the East Coast, and I was a high school English teacher for 30 years, been retired for a bit. And I came to Lenormand about 15 years ago, when I was suddenly widowed and with a 15-year-old teenage girl. And so my husband died in October. And so, of course, that's the beginning of the school year, right? The school had only started a month before. So I kind of had to hit the ground running after that. And I didn't want to be one of those, I don't know. I think I noticed that people are not thrilled to be around widows. I think it's understandable. It's kind of as though it's the same awkwardness we feel if we encounter someone who's only got one arm or one leg. We say to ourselves, wait a minute, it's supposed to be two. And the fact that it's one reminds me of my own fragility in this world. That could be me. And I think people respond to widows the same way. Could it be catching? So I went out of my way to put on a good front. I don't think that I necessarily recommend that to other new widows, and I definitely, in fact, wouldn't. But I longed for that 3 a.m. person that I could call up and say, oh my God, am I going to be able to keep the house? How am I going to put this girl through college? What's a sewer bill? I didn't even know. I thought you just flushed the toilet and that was it. Now I've got a sewer bill. There were a lot of things that I was very up in the air about. And I was a tarotist first and then came to Lenormand just very unexpectedly. A friend had a deck in her hand. It was a sealed deck. She had no idea what it was, but she thought it might be something interesting. And I just grabbed it. And it was Ciro Marchetti's Gilded Reverie. It's a beautiful, beautiful, evocative deck. And so I started to learn the cards and discovered that there was only one English resource available at the time. And so I read that. I read the French resources. I couldn't read the German. And then I said, okay, well, I've read everything there is to read. I have memorized the cards. I have memorized the card numbers, which is very important. And I know the basic spreads. Now it's time to just branch out. So let me try a grand tableau. Of course, that's a spread with all of the cards. So I had it laid out on my big bed, and the more I looked at it, the more it swam in front of my eyes. And it's because my eyes were filling with tears. And I thought, oh, I don't get this. This is just too much. And then all of a sudden, I heard a voice, and I'm deaf in my right ear. I have been since infancy. And so the voice that I heard was in my deaf ear. So at first I thought, wait, what? I never hear in that ear, number one. Number two, the voice that I heard was my late husband's. And number three were the words that he said. He said to me, Erika, it's not childbirth. And I thought, what does he know about childbirth? But then I thought, but wait a minute. He said it's not childbirth. So what is childbirth? It's hard work. It's bearing down. It's pushing. It's all of that. He said it's not that. And I've done the bearing down. I've done the pushing. I've done the hard work. I've done the memorization and learned everything that any book could teach me about Lenormand. So what's the opposite of bearing down? And I realized it's letting go. And in that instant, as soon as I said to myself, Erika, he's saying, let go, that grand tableau became crystal clear to me. So I started reading for friends and colleagues. And at the time I was teaching, and even in my lunch hour, at first I would run people down to get them to let me read for them. Then when word started to spread that I was good, I had to run away from people. Like I'd run into the bathroom at lunchtime. People would bang on the door and they would say, Erika, are you going to read this lunch hour? I need your cards. So I thought, okay, well, you know what? This is great and very complimentary, right? But these are my friends and my family and my colleagues. Let me see if I really am any good. So I would get home from school, around 4:00, throw my bag down, make some coffee, and then I would go onto forums online and read for people around the world. And these are people who you would never see. They would never see you. And they would just type their question, right? So the question would be something like, what does he think about her? From India, right? And of course, my ego wants to say, well, who is he and who is her? Is this a love thing? Is this an employer-employee thing? Is it a teacher-student? Is it a father-daughter? But then I realized, Erika, that's your ego. Nobody asked your opinion. They didn't ask you for your opinion. They asked you to ask the cards. And so I would pull cards and then I would write these long responses And people went crazy for them, so that I would come home and say, okay, I'm open for 10 readings, and 100 people would ask, or I'd say, okay, I'll do 25, and 500 would ask. So I never charged anyone because, first of all, I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know people made money doing this. And I was doing it for two reasons. I was doing it because it was great practice and it was making me feel closer to spirit. It made me know we are never alone. Our hands are always held. We are always guided and guarded and protected. And if we want to call it spirit, that's great. If you want to call it God, that's great. Or you can call it your higher self, which to me is the part of you that's God. So that was one reason. And the other reason I kept doing it was because I knew I was really helping people. What I didn't know was that word was spreading. And so then I started to hear from the great card readers in the card reading community. And they would write me, DMs, and they would say, we're watching your work and you're amazing. You're terrific. Keep it up. And I thought, well, isn't that nice? So, and then I got approached by a local shop. I lived in New Jersey at the time, and there was a local shop that was very, very famous. People would come in busloads from New York City to go to the shop in New Jersey. And they asked me if I wanted to come and read. I said, well, I'm a teacher. I can't do that. And they said, well, you don't teach on the weekends? And I said, no. And they said, well, come on the weekends. So I did. And that's when I started to make money doing this work. And again, the word of mouth, it spread about what I do. So I got approached by a publisher who asked me if I could write this book. And so I said, sure. So I wrote it and turned the manuscript in 2 weeks early and, waited them with bated breath. And they got back to me and they said, we don't need to do an edit at all on this book. It's perfect. So I thought, well, oh, that's great. So that's how the book came to be. And then I really wanted my own deck. So I contracted with La Panthère Studio, and they created a deck for me that is just evocative and beautiful. And the other thing I really wanted, I'm Black, and which you can't see because we're not on screen, but I am. And I there are a lot of, quiet as it's kept, there are a lot of Black Lenormand readers. And I wanted the mainstream world, I wanted everybody to know that this oracle is available to everyone. And so what I did was I made sure that the people on my cover of my book were Black, and then the people in my deck are Black. And it's just sort of an homage to the culture that I come from. And what's been beautiful is how that's been responded to. People have responded saying that they're in tears to see themselves represented in this European oracle, which again is actually quite well known among Black card reading circles. So I feel like I killed a lot of birds with this stone, and I'm thrilled. I love it. Lenormand will always inform what I do. What I love about it most is that it's a word language. That's what people don't understand about it. It's a word language. So if you're a tarot reader, your best bet is to leave your tarot tools outside the door and just use this oracle. Eventually, if you are good and you work hard, you can do what I do, which is to weave the two oracles together in conversation. But just like any conversation, they take turns, right? And they each speak their own language in answering a particular question. But Lenormand can answer any question that tarot can. That's the other thing people didn't realize about this oracle, including the Europeans. I think that they thought, if I lose my keys, Lenormand will help me find them. If I am giving a party and I want to know the weather, Lenormand will help me figure that out. And that is true. But Lenormand can also answer questions like, what is my life purpose? Why am I here? How can I get past this pain that I feel? Anything that tarot can answer, Lenormand can also answer, but it will answer it in its own language.
Yeah,
So
I love so much of
version.
what you're saying there. Very cool. Yeah, I love, first of all, I just do want to say, I really do appreciate the cards that you have pictured here. And are these the cards from the deck? I wasn't aware of the deck, actually.
No, not at all. In fact, quiet as it's kept, I think this is probably clip art, right?
Okay.
But I just insisted, okay, clip art or not. No, my deck is more, I don't know, romantic, lyrical, expressive. It's beautiful. It's just
I
beautiful.
can't wait to check it out. Fuck yeah, very cool. It's always cool to see different things represented. I think that there's a lot of baggage with a lot of these systems that whenever we can kind of like leave some of that in the past, I think it's really cool. So
Right.
I really like what you're saying about how Lenormand, and I'm now realizing that I'm probably saying that
No,
wrong.
no, you're saying
So,
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Listen,
oh,
if we
go
were
on
in
ahead.
France, if we were in France, we would say Lenormand. But guess what? We're not in France.
Okay.
So we can say Lenormand, 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 however you want to say it. It's fine.
I'm from the West, so I'm like Lenormand, but so,
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
but anyway, yeah, and Tarot, they have a language that they can talk to each other. I've played with that a little bit, but they also do have like their very own, like very unique voices. Like the Tower card in Lenormand is not the Tower card in Tarot, right? And I'm hoping that we
Correct.
can maybe give a little bit of general context about the deck and maybe a little bit of history if there's any to be had, or whatever
Well,
you'd like to share.
there's a little bit to be had. In some ways, its beginnings are shrouded in
Mhm.
mystery. It is a German/French card system, started out as a card game. And this is what's shrouded in mystery. We don't know who these people are. They decided that they would do something that's actually, when you think about it, kind of a modern thing. They thought, we can use this as a divining tool
Mhm.
and sell it, market it that way because it works that way. But what we need is we need a name to put on it. And so they looked around and they came up with Madame Lenormand. Now, Madame Lenormand had been a seer, she was a medium and a seer from the 1700s, the early 18th century. And she had been the official medium for people like Robespierre and Napoleon, and was incredibly accurate and very well known. So, as a marketing device, they just slapped her name on it. She never read with these cards.
Oh, okay. All right. That's wild. Okay.
Yeah. So it comes from, the late 1800s. It's a 36 card system, although most modern decks will have a minimum of 38 cards because originally there was only one man and one woman, but now there's a bow to convention. I think it's a good one. We have two men and two women. And then another modern convention is that a lot of Lenormand creators deck creators are come to it from tarot. And so when they make a Lenormand deck and they get to the end of the 38th card, they say, you know what? I feel like I'm not done. I feel like there need to be more cards because I'm used to 78 in a tarot deck. So many modern decks will have extra cards. Some of them more successful than others. For example, I love Rana George's extra 4 cards. I think they're terrific. I love Monica Badirsky. She's a Canadian. I love her extra cards. And what I decided to do with my deck is, my theory is that Lenormand in and of itself is really a complete full system. But to bow to convention, I added one extra card in my deck. And I'll let that be a mystery.
Ooh, okay. I'm so excited to check out this deck. It sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
So for people who are unfamiliar with the system of Lenormand or whatever, like how is it different than Tarot? Like what are the ways that a Tarot reader needs to like what tools do they need to leave at the door?
So again, the first and most obvious one is the number of cards, right? 78 for tarot, 38, 36 traditionally, but generally speaking nowadays, 38 or more for Lenormand. Now, also, each card has a number, and it's important to memorize the number with the card. If anybody who's taken French or Spanish or Italian knows that when you learned a noun, you had the le or the la in front of it. You had to learn, it's le chien, la chat. So just learn the number along with the card because that will prove helpful to you later on if you're going to read a big spread like the Grand Tableau. Okay. Another difference is that tarot is what I call a pictorial imagistic system, meaning that the picture is all important. What matters is the colors that are used, what direction somebody's head is facing, whether somebody's toe is in the water or out of the water. There's astrology and astronomy and religion and psychology. There's all kinds of things in the tarot. And you can do a full reading with tarot with a single card. That is not the case for Lenormand. So even though Lenormand also is pictures that in ink on cardboard, that's where then we diverge. Lenormand's 36 symbols are archetypal. Everyone will recognize them. The dog, the house, the tree, the letter, the garden, the ring. These are just things, everyday things. So what's important is the word, not the picture. And so if you're creating a Lenormand deck, you don't want it to be muddied by a whole bunch of stuff. So for example, let's say you were doing clouds, and in that cloudy sky or in that picture of the clouds, you have also a tree, or you also have the sun. Well, that's problematic because how do you read it? So, if you're just doing that one image, that image has to be clear. So, for example, let's take the word tree. It doesn't matter if it's an oak tree, an elm tree, a weeping willow. It doesn't matter if there are leaves on it or not. It's just the word tree. So how do you read with this thing? Well, bear in mind that the English language has 26 letters. From just those 26 letters, anything and everything that has ever been spoken or written in English has been comprised of those letters. This is how Lenormand functions. When you're a little kid, you learn that alphabet song and you really think you're hot stuff because you can sing the alphabet song. Then you get clued into the fact that if you mix those letters up, you can make words. That's amazing. Then you realize, or you're taught, that from those words, you can make sentences. And from those sentences, you can make paragraphs. And from those paragraphs, you can make story. Lenormand is nothing if not an oracle that is comprised of story. So when you would never do a Lenormand reading with a single card, nor would you do it with just two cards. Lenormand is a team sport, a group activity, and Lenormand cards like to dance with their sisters. So readings are done in groups of 3 or more. This makes infinite sense because, for example, if I say the word dog, I show you the picture of the card with the dog on it. Well, or let's just say I say the word dog. Okay, and you've got an image in your mind of something with a snout, 2 ears, a horizontal kind of body, 4 legs, and a tail. But when I say the big black dog leapt at my throat with its fangs dripping, well, now I've just made that dog come alive. Mm-hmm. If I say the little brown dog wagged its tail and licked me like I was an ice cream cone, I've painted a very different image. How did I do it? I took the word dog and I put other words around it. Lenormand is like that. Each card is a word, and those words are strung together to make sentences. And again, then paragraph and story from there. So it's a word language. I went to China about, a few years ago and was proficient, of course, at that time in Lenormand. And I was going to be by myself for large swaths of time, and I was traveling all over China. And I didn't want to bring any of my decks because some parts of China have a more, communist, repressive feeling than others. And I was afraid that my deck would be confiscated.
A little bit too spiritual or whatever for their taste.
I don't know what they would,
Yeah, okay.
So I just took a stack of 3x5 cards and I wrote the numbers. Each card had a number 1 through 36. And I was able to read all over China for myself, for people I met, for friends back home, just with note cards that had the numbers 1 through 36. I could have torn up a piece of paper into 36 pieces and written 1 through 36 and been able to do a Lenormand reading, because I know, for example, that the card 18 is the dog, the card 5 is the tree, the card 4 is the house. So it's a word language. So you can read it in a very basic way, see, spot, run. And I think a lot of people prior to my book thought that was really the limit for Lenormand. But you can also, just as true with the English alphabet, you can read like Shakespeare, right? Or like Toni Morrison, because the tool, and this is true for any divinatory tool, in my opinion, the tool is just the tool. We are the magic.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right on. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great explanation of Lenormand and how it is a sort of like language. And yeah, thank you so much.
3, Romeo, 2, 4, Yankee, Romeo, 7, Bravo, Delta, Quebec.
Greetings, it's me, Luxa from the future. We'll be getting back to the rest of my chat with Erika Robinson soon to hear about some of the educational philosophy that she put into her book, as well as a bunch of other cool things like Chronos and Kairos and how the cards can translate between these realms or states, and lots of other cool stuff. Also stoked to share a fun little chat I had with my friend Chelsea about astrology in a couple of minutes here. After the interview, we're going to be getting into some fun listener mail and shoutouts, including some thoughts about simulation hypothesis. But now, let me give you an update about what we have going on with the Green Mushroom Project and Void House. Green Mushroom Project is an ongoing group magical working, which I designed and that some friends and I started back in 2020 with the following 4 objectives. To create a network of green, or perhaps Venus aspected magic for practitioners to draw upon for creative, healing, and restorative works. Build and strengthening community and empowering the individuals within it. Strengthen our position against hate groups and other bullshit through solidarity. There's unfortunately a sickening amount of that stuff in occultism, and I think as a community we could probably do a lot better job self-policing. The 4th objective, to encourage individuals to use powerful tech to become more agentic. Working with the biological metaphor of the ecological relationship that some fungi share with some plants, if we, the magical practitioners of Green Mushroom Project, are like a forest of trees, the green mushroom current connects us and strengthens us in unseen ways. It is a hypho sigil. Hypho, of course, means web. So, long story short, it's been going really well. There's a lot of fun and free activities planned on the Green Machine Discord server, home of the Green Mushroom Hypho Sigil Project, and Void House, our new experiment in creating a consent-forward magical space. You can join us for our weekly Fungal Friday chats about various magical topics, as well as special events like ceremonies and seasonal celebrations. We also have a monthly rune study group and a book club in which we are languorously and luxuriously discussing the book 6 Ways by Aidan Wachter. I'm also going to be starting another book club soon called Subversive Book Club, where we're going to be reading some subversive titles for fun. Another thing we have coming up on the Green Machine Discord server is a special event about Wreck This Deck, which you can hear all about in the previous episode of this show, episode 85, Wreck This Deck with Becky Annison. And we have our event scheduled for Friday, August 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern. We're going to talk about our experiences playing the game, share pictures of cards from our wrecked decks, and talk about different ways that we might be able to play this game collaboratively. This is a solo role-playing game in which you trap demons in playing cards, and it's very fun and interesting. So now that we've discovered all 23 books of the 23 Bibliomancy scripture, which is a giant cut-up we spent about the last 23 months creating, I'll be hosting monthly discussion groups on the 23rd of the month in which we will celebrate the number by talking about things like Discordianism, Temple of Psychic Youth, consent and maintaining personal agency, while dissolving control with a capital C in the sort of topey sense of the word. We're also going to be doing some fun work with cut-ups and automatic writing. The first experimental chat of this type went really well, and I want to thank everybody so much who attended that night, as we held space for each other to get into thinking about some uncomfortable political stuff and also to connect on a human level. I really appreciate everybody's contributions. I've been conducting some research along the lines of some of what came up that night in that chat and putting together a presentation for this 23rd August of 2024 about some of the intersections between influence tactics that some politicians and cult leaders use and things that we see come up in magical practice. We're going to be talking about the book Propaganda and the work of Edward Bernays and some landmark studies in the history of psychology, as well as the BITE model for indoctrination and control. It's all scary stuff, but also very interesting and good to know, I think. The Scorpios out there are gonna love it. We're also going to be continuing on with some of the magical work we did last month by conducting an automatic writing and cut-up exercise as we focus on the path to better times. The Green Machine Discord server is also a great place to come and ask questions or pose philosophical inquiries. We have a lot of people who are pretty experienced and who are into sharing about what's worked for them in their practices, and we love to get into conversations about that stuff. So, in addition to learning all that rad stuff about magic and occultism, there are also several opportunities for learning about consent and how this applies to magic, spirituality, and the will. There's that sticky word that comes up again. And other cool stuff like that that will help people maintain agency, enjoy better relationships, and move more safely in the world. We have some really cool stuff in the works, including a workshop about magic and trauma-informed practices. Shout out to Dave Neal for helping me put that together. I will let you all know when that will be available. Also very proud to be hosting a free 2-part workshop about consent and group work and magic, which has been created especially for Void House by the Consent Academy, and which will take place September 14th and 15th on the Green Machine Discord. We're probably going to hold the actual workshop over Zoom, but we're organizing everything on Discord, so that's a good place to keep an eye on things. You can email me or reach out to me on Instagram for a link to the Discord server if you're interested in attending. I've mentioned this before in previous episodes, but I decided to kind of pay it forward with this workshop by using some of the Patreon money from the show. So I really would like as many people as possible who are interested in being there to attend. I think this is a really cool and important thing. There is a Foundations of Consent workshop that Consent Academy offers for free each month, and you can also take it for $15 at your own pace. This thing is going to be a prerequisite to taking the more specific magical consent workshop that we're offering through Void House. So check out consentacademy.com to find a calendar of their classes and workshops. There's a link in the show notes. I've also posted reminders about some of these classes and workshops on the Green Machine Discord server in case people want to check them out. So to learn more about the Green Mushroom Project and Void House, you can check out the bonus episode between 80 and 81 of this show to see a video presentation about the founding of the Hypho Sigil Project and taking our work further with Void House. I've been taking a series of classes called Consent and Leadership with the Consent Academy this summer. Almost done with it now. This has been a really helpful opportunity for me to build some of the skills I was previously lacking and to be more proactive in creating a scenario where magic can be explored in a chill and hopefully more functional environment. Also where the alchemical power of consent and intent and things like that can be investigated. I feel really stoked to be pursuing this line of inquiry and to be doing this work. I'm really proud that Void House is offering these types of resources to people in the chaos magic and broader occult communities. I think that having a better and more robust understanding of what consent is and what it can look like in a magical practice and in a relationship and all of the rest of it will be an opportunity to forge new ground magically, even individually or as a group. And so I'm so excited to be a part of this effort. I feel really grateful to have found an organization like Consent Academy. They're doing really cool fucking work and really important, I think. I would encourage people to check them out. I put a link to their website in the show notes. I'd also like to thank everybody who has been expressing so much interest in the idea of having consent be a central philosophical pillar of magical group work. And all of the Void House visitors who have been attending consent workshops and chiming in with their thoughts and ideas about consent and magic and how we can do things in a more chill way. It's been really amazing, and I really fucking appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck yeah. Alright, so I wanted to share a very short little astrology chat that I had with a very talented friend of mine which we had while we were hanging out at her house enjoying some cheese and strawberries and Prosecco, brunch shit, and talking about magic. She's created a very cool little visual aid in which she can sort of like keep up with what's going on in the sky, and I'll put a picture of that in the show notes. A few of you have reached out letting me know that you really enjoyed the little bit of audio that I recorded during the solar eclipse earlier this year, and I've been looking for ways to bring more of that type of thing to the show. Been going on a lot of cool adventures recently, and I hope that this will continue if it's possible, so I got myself some new recording toys and tested them out over brunch. So Chelsea, being the very good sport that she is, was kind enough to share some thoughts about the recent astro weather and about how its energy might be playing out during this lunar cycle. We are joined in this recording by Rago the dog and cats Pepper and Laszlo. Enjoy.
This is Lux Strata. It's the 2nd of August at 12:35. I'm here with Chelsea, aka Weird Road.
Yay!
We're kicking it with Rago and Laszlo and Pepper, brunching,
Yes.
discussing or about to discuss what's going on with the astrology.
Yeah. All right. So today's astrology is fun. I guess we're approaching the full moon. No, new moon in Leo coming up on the 3rd of the 4th.
Okay.
So it's all going to happen in Leo, and Venus is also sitting in Leo. So
Okay. Fire. I love this.
Super
Okay.
fiery energy.
Yeah, I
for the
love
new
this.
moon.
I feel like this is kind of party vibes, Venus, Leo.
Oh,
maybe,
yeah.
like, yeah.
And it's very like it's very self-centered too, because it's the sun. So the sun is like your ego, your personality,
And it's Leo. So.
And it's Leo, so it's just like, look at me.
Look at me.
Everything's illuminated. I want all the things. It's the new moon, so it's like peak manifestation time. So it's literally like time to ask for what you want.
Fuck yeah.
Kind of energy. And I know I'm really bad at the angles. I know that this weekend Venus and Uranus, I think, are in a square. So 90 degrees away from each other. So they're a little bit facing off, but because Uranus is in Taurus, that's Venus's home sign. So like Venus is kind of hosting Uranus's chaotic energy. So it's definitely like, it feels very experimental, putting on costumes, changing something up with your appearance or your home with Venus and Taurus. That's a lot of home energy and like personal environment energy. Yeah, and with the sun, it's going to be a lot about how like you're living, right? Like how you're expressing yourself both in your personal life and externally, like to the world. Just super fun.
Fuck yeah. I love it.
Mm-hmm. And it's also Lunasa.
Yeah, we've got
Right?
Lunasa in the mix here. So do you have any special plans for this particular mix that we've got going on here?
I am just kind of leaning into the experimental energy and just trying to embrace like spending more time testing out different makeup looks or like different ways to wear my hair. I'm currently working on a YouTube setup, so it's a lot about camera angles, lighting, and just kind of experimenting and kind of figuring out how I want to be perceived is my big personal thing. So those are my plans. It's a lot about kind of like really experimental, but it's not concrete. Like all of these things are just playing, right? It's very playful energy. I feel like Leo is a super playful kind of, is Leo's fixed summer, right? It's the dead of summer. So it's very, it's fixed fire.
Rago the dog agrees.
Rago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that makes sense. And I think that the idea of playfulness, getting weird with it, like the idea of Uranus, Taurus helping Leo with this, like, like come over to my house and let's get weird. Like, let's try on some costumes. Like, honestly, this is sort of what I've been getting into. And playing with like, just different, explorations of that and everything. It's never too early for Halloween either.
Exactly. And like, what better time than Leo season, where it's like kind of about just feeling good about yourself. This is the swimsuit body season, which is just like, kind of embracing the heat and embracing your body too. like get comfortable in front of a mirror, get comfortable being seen, and being comfortable being seen in a unusual light or you can be seen as a weirdo or as like unconventional and still be really fucking hot.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm hearing, let your freak flag fly, let your light shine, take up some fucking space, get weird with it, but in a Venus way where it's going to be a fun time for everybody.
Exactly. And I think because Uranus is in Taurus too, where like Venus is hosting it, it's going to be a lot of like close circle friends, very, very centralized personal life energy as opposed to more of an external thing. I mean, I'm sure it'll show up in the collective too in some way, but as far as like personally, it does feel like it has a lot more be with your crew, be with your group of weirdos, your partners in crime, etc., etc.
Yeah, I love that. Fuck yeah. All right, well, this has been a fun little visit to the stars. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is fun. Right on. Just kind of riffing off of like what I see on the board.
Yeah, we're literally just kicking it here, having some brunch, and well, thank you so much.
And my dog's got a lot of opinions.
Absolutely, and they are important, and they need to be heard. All right, fuck yeah.
All right, thanks so much to Chelsea for sharing her thoughts, and to Reiko as well, of course. Although the new moon we discussed is now in the process of waxing, I've been thinking a lot about how to express some of the energies we discussed in ways which will hopefully be fun and interesting and healthy and sustainable. Not always an easy balance to strike, but a golden one if you can find it. What type of stuff do you get up to when you want to let your freak flag fly? How are you going to be celebrating what remains of this Leo season? Curious to hear. You can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com or find me on Instagram at luxoccultpod. Alright, we're going to be diving in to hear the rest of my chat with Erika Robinson in just a moment here, including some very cool insights about how the cards can act as translators and more. But I wanted to quickly announce that I'm excited to release a new Green Mushroom Astral Temple meditation, which some people from the Audiophilia project I conducted at the beginning of the year have requested I create. So it leads the listener into a area of the Green Mushroom Project shared astral space, which has been created specifically for chilling in a consent-forward space and getting comfortable doing magic of a sexual or somatic nature. The Audiophilia folks told me some of what they would like to have in terms of vibes and imagery and the rest of it, and I'm very stoked to be presenting it. The next iteration of the Audiophilia experiment will be taking place within the context of Void House, and the space we created for this meditation offers some additional protection, if you will, in terms of boundaries, consent, and safety. I wrote it with the idea of exploring one's own internal consent in mind, the relationship that we have with ourselves as we negotiate with our sometimes conflicted inner desires and the stories we've been told about desire in general. Exploring one's inner desire, one's inner consent is a great place to start with this type of work. I've been using the track for some stuff surrounding, personal remediation. There's some stuff that happened earlier this year that I'm, kind of back at square one with some of my work of this type with, so that's okay. The path is crooked, and sometimes it doubles back on itself. And this has been a really excellent opportunity to approach things from a new angle. So I plan to publish the meditation, which is called Get a Room with Yourself at the Green Mushroom Astral Space, as a bonus episode on the Lux Occult RSS feed as well as on YouTube. There's a sort of cheesy little video that I made for it, complete with the, signature cheesy old school graphics that I like to use. There will also be a ritual version of this track available soon, which has audio of me conducting work with it, as I attempt to put what was broken back together again, I suppose. So after we do our consent and magic workshop this September with Void House, we'll have things more up and running, and I'll put out a call for participants for the next round of Audiophilia, which involves using audio, ritual, self-pleasure, and self-love to dissolve internal barriers like shame and promote healing. We've got some fun listener mail to get to later on after the interview. But now I am so stoked to present the rest of my chat with Erika Robinson. Cheers. There's a lot of things that I really appreciated about the book. One of the things, and you mentioned that you were a teacher, and that totally makes sense because this book is actually like a very good teaching tool too. If you're looking to learn about Lenormand, this is a great tool for that because it offers, checkpoints where you're asked to, as the reader, like go through it and make sure that you understand and can apply what you've just read and exercises, which I think is really helpful.
Right. Well, one of the things that I used was a sort of a scaffolding idea, which is that I wanted people to, from very, very early on in the book, say to themselves, wait a minute, I feel like I just read. I mean, how is that possible? So I start with just the first three cards, and then I build from that foundation so that you're never going to get lost because you understood the step before. So each lesson builds on itself.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think one of the other things that I like about this is that, a lot of times with educational workbooks and stuff, like you'll be asked to fill them out and then there's a right or a wrong answer. And there can be some like anxiety about whether the answer you're writing down is going to be the right one or the wrong one or whatever. But that's not the case with this type of stuff. There's not really a way that you can write in the back of this book, like whether or not, people have done this properly. They really are going to have to sort of at some point give themselves permission and trust themselves.
I'm so glad you said that. I'll tell you something funny. So I've had, wonderful reviews, of course, on Amazon, and that's where you can get the book. But one person said that they said this should be like book one, and book two should be where she gives us lots of examples, and then she gives us her answer, and then we try our answer. And I thought, yeah, that's not going to happen, dear. Because the other thing about teaching or about parenting, if anybody's a parent out there, is that, of course, first you hold the baby when you cross the street because the baby can't walk. Mm-hmm. Then the baby gets old enough to walk and you walk it across the street, but you're holding its hand. Then there comes a time when the baby wants to cross by themselves to meet their friends. And so you very watchfully pay attention as they cross the street. Eventually, that kid's going to be crossing streets that you have no idea about because they're grown and they're doing their thing. Well, a good teacher teaches that way. Of course, in the beginning, you hold somebody's hand. But then after that, they have to practice on their own. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that the one missing link is that I'm not teaching math. I'm not even teaching English. What I'm teaching is a divinatory tool, how to use a divinatory tool. For me, and there are people, just to be fair, there are Europeans, and this is a European system, who will, well, not anymore, but who originally disagreed with me when I said that this tool also, it's helpful if you want to read well to employ your intuition. People will argue that, no, you don't use intuition for Lenormand. That's for tarot. That's not true. So each card, as you can imagine, has multiple meanings, right? So let's take, for example, the bear. That's card number 15. Mm-hmm. Okay, the bear can refer to weight issues. It can refer to food. It's the card for the mother or any older woman. It's the card for a boss on your job. It's the card for financial stability, and things like investments and that kind of money. And it's also the card for the narcissist. Well, mm-hmm. Here you are, you're doing a reading and you pull the bear and a bunch of other cards. Well, how in the world do you know whether it's referencing, a financial windfall or whether it's referencing what you put in your mouth to eat, whether we're talking about a narcissist or your sweet little grandmother? Well, the other cards will tell you. So you have to look at the other cards. You have to look at the question. And by the way, Lenormand loves a good question. And you look at the context, but then there's a fourth or fifth, I don't know where I'm up to, element, and that is to listen to what you're given. Mm. listen to what you're given, because as a reader, when you use your intuition, you'll get information and you'll be tempted to second guess yourself. Like, oh, that doesn't make sense, or that can't be right, or I'm not going to say that. Well, then you've dropped the hand of spirit in this endeavor. And what you want to do is grab that hand back, apologize, and say, wait, tell me again, what did you say? because I really believe that spirit is at least my partner in doing this work. One of the things that I'm known for is a 23 card spread. And that came from me doing the grand tableau and being very impressed that the grand tableau, which is the spread with all 36 cards, it will tell you a little bit about everything in a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. And it's a kind of a parlor trick, but most people, when they come for readings, don't want to know about everything in their life. Mm-hmm. What they want is deep, in-depth information about an area, right? And it might be love, it might be money, it might be health, it could be any number of things, but they generally want a deeper dive than just you telling me a few things about every single thing. So I thought, well, how can I create a spread like that? And, so that's another thing to say, is that these cards are tools. There is nothing holy or sacred about them. We are the holy and sacred, right? So I thought, okay, I'm going to start with 5-card spread, and then I'm just going to pull clarifiers on all 5 of those cards. That gives me 20. Then I pull a final 3. This spread has ended up being a very, very deep dive on a single issue, so that when I read for someone, I don't need to know the backstory. Because if you tell me the backstory and then I say something, you're going to say, yeah, but I just told you that. So all I want to know when I'm reading for someone is just give me an area of your life that you'd like me to look at. That's it. And then I will pick a card to be the stand-in card for that issue. We call that the significator, or the focus card. And then I pull cards around it, and then I read deeply on that subject. The first 2 lines of the reading will tend to be a backstory, like the things that you probably would have told me if I had let you tell me those things. And so what's so cute is that people will say, oh my God, how did you know that? Or they'll say, this is even funnier, they'll say, well, that already happened. So, I already know that part. Okay, you know it, but I didn't know it. I have this theory that what happens is that, here's how I look at cards. I believe I believe what the Greeks say and what physics tells us. Physics says that the past, the present, and the future all happen at the same time. Okay, that's crazy, but apparently it's true. But as human beings, that's a hard thing to wrap our minds around. Our higher selves, though, are the repositories for all of that the past, the present, and the future. So the Greeks say that there's 2 kinds of time. One they call chronos, time on the clock, time on the watch, time on the calendar. And that's the time that you and I live by. The other kind of time is they call kairos, and that is the fullness of time. When I was a little girl, if I asked a question above my pay grade, my mother would say, you'll know in the fullness of time. And I knew that meant, girl, not today, probably not tomorrow, but maybe when you're a big girl or you're a lady, you'll learn. And so kairos includes chronos, but it also includes the past, and it also includes the future. So when someone contracts with me for a reading, they are agreeing to allow me to go up to the vault of their knowing, we'll call it. And I go to the right person's vault, open it up because they've given me permission, pull down the information about the question that they have, march myself and this information back down to Chronos and my client across the table, and then lay out the information with cards. Because what are the cards? The language of Chronos and the language of Kairos are different. So we need a translation tool. We need a mitigating device. That's what the cards do. So in picture form, I lay out what I've been given, and then I speak the language of Chronos to my sitter, but I'm telling them the story that I find in Kairos. You see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautifully put. Yeah, thank you so much. I really love that breakdown of it.
Right. So every time you read, you are acting as an intermediary between worlds.
Mhm.
And so when people say, "Oh my God, how did you know that's true?" I love when that happens, because I remind people that they are as much participant in this operation as I am, that their higher self and my higher self and spirit itself are engaged in the process of helping them grapple with this question. And it's a very good way, instead of just, in writing, we talk about you should show, not tell. Don't tell, show. It's a great way to show people that they're surrounded and guided and guarded and loved by spirit.
I love that. That's so cool. You also said something which I really want to ask a little bit more about. The idea of consent is something that's been coming up in so many conversations as it relates to magic. And you had mentioned, you've asked for permission from these people to look into their kind of like their vaults, their, I don't know, Akashic record or whatever it is that we want to think about there to
Right.
get this information. And I'm wondering if you could share any thoughts about that idea of
Sure.
asking permission and everything.
Sure, I think it's important to a discussion about ethics, right? So, one example I'll give is that when I worked in the shop, I would have usually women come in and they would ask about their adult children. And so I made a contract with Spirit, and the contract is that because that's called a third party reading, right? You're reading it for on a third party.
Trying to spy on somebody else or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, essentially, yes. And so the agreement that I have is that I will only be shown what that other person would want my sitter to know. Now, sometimes that can be, they don't want you to know anything, or they don't want them to know anything, but sometimes you can be quite surprised. So, for example, I was reading for this woman, and it was about her daughter who was being very standoffish, or just, I don't know, distant, we'll call it. So I look at the cards and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? Because it was very clear from the cards that this girl was gay and that this is something that had not been discussed. And I said to myself, well, you know what? The deal is in place. I would not be shown this if this girl did not want her mother to know it. So I said what I saw, and the mother said, which makes all the sense in the world, well, I've always known that, but we've never talked about it. I said, well, okay, here's what you do. You can go home and you can say to your daughter, listen, I did this crazy thing. I was out shopping and I had lunch with some friends, and there was a shop, and I went in and I had a reading and I asked what was going on with you. And this is what they said. And then, hopefully it'll broach a conversation. Well, she came back to me the next week with flowers and a big hug and tears down her face, because that is literally what happened. It caused the subject to be broached between them. The girl didn't know how to tell the mother. The mother already knew, but she didn't know if she should say anything. But this reading made clear that this is something the mother wanted to know. So that was a great example.
That's awesome.
But again, a lot of times I won't read on third party situations, because ask, like, okay, for example, this is very common. What does he think of me? Well, I mean, what do you think he thinks of you? Like, so sometimes I end up doing sort of counseling like that. Maybe this is a conversation the two of you need to have, this was a good one. A young woman in her 20s came to me and she said, I'm going on a blind date in a couple of days, and I want to know if this will be the love of my life. Will this be Mr. Right? So I look at the cards, and the cards are telling me, no. So this is not Mr. Right, and they're telling me some other stuff too. And I won't say I don't remember what the layout was, but bottom line, I said to the girl, I said, so remember I'm a mom, right? I said, so where are you meeting him? And she said, it's such and such hotel. I said, oh, okay. I said, where? At the bar? At the restaurant? No, he gave me a room number. And I said to myself, oh my God. I said, okay, look, here's what the cards are showing me. If you go on this date and you go to this room number, I'm sure that a good time will be had by all. A good time, and that's all it will be. He is Mr. Right now, not Mr. Right.
Mm-hmm.
There is no sign of any kind of longevity of this relationship. And that was your question to me. But, you will have fun. My advice would be meet him in the restaurant, at least get a meal out of it. At least decide, have a conversation before.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Never hurts
no judgment. But,
sure.
So she comes back a couple weeks later and she said, I just wanted you to know I decided not to go. And I said, good for you. So,
yeah, right on.
Third party readings, for example, if I'm having issues with a person, I might look to see what their intention is toward me, what kind of state they're in. I will do that. But again, it's always in the interest of harmony, right? I think that if you use your gift in the wrong way, your gift will be taken from you at the very least. At the very least. So I think it's important to be careful about third-party readings, also to be careful about reading on things like health or legal issues. I do it, and I'm very good at the health thing. I'm good at all of it, actually, but I also went to divinity school. So I know how to have hard conversations with people about difficult things.
Oh, wow.
If you're not trained in that way, I would steer clear of it because it's very tempting, especially if you're a young new reader, to show what you can do, to show off. You can do a lot of damage to people because this is really sacred healing work. And when it's used as anything but that, there are repercussions that I don't think are desirable.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really conscientious to note for sure. So I want to ask, is there some advice for listeners who want to approach Lenormand and are curious about how to first dip in a toe?
I think get a deck and get my book. I think, and I say that because it's the first book by an American. The book that I read years ago is also very good. It's called Secrets of the Lenormand Oracle. I think you can still access it, by Sylvie Steinbach, who's French. There's an encyclopedic book. I forget the name of it, but it's by Kathleen Matthews, and she's English. There's a book called, I don't know what it's called, but it's by Rana George, and she's Lebanese. But mine is the first by an American. And I think that it's very clear, again, written by a teacher, and it takes you step by step. But I will also say practice, practice, practice is the best way to get good at anything. A book will only, or a course, and I'm about to put an online course up in about a month, will teach you the rudiments. But in order to get good at something, Malcolm Gladwell's got this book out. It says that if you do anything for 1,000 hours, you will become an expert at it. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think that's true. And if you want to just replace the 1,000 hours with a lot of time, I've read for thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And I read for thousands of people before I made a dime. Now, of course, nobody wants to hear that. I get all the time asked, well, how can I make a living doing this work? Because it seems like it's easy. Mm-hmm. It can be very emotionally taxing. When I first started out and at the shop, I was reading 25 people a day. That's a lot of people. Yeah. And I remember I came home one day and I just opened my door and I just sat down on my stairs and cried. And I thought, well, what is that all about? And then I realized I was carrying everybody's stuff. Mm-hmm. So I asked for another little arrangement with Spirit, kind of like the arrangement that I had, that I only be shown what that third party would want to be known. I said, listen, I would like to be 100% present for my sitter when I'm reading. And as soon as they walk away from my table, I want amnesia. And I've been granted that gift. So that, if I have a repeat client, I won't remember what I read for them the last time. And that's because their stuff's not my stuff to carry. So I'm able to be fully present in that half hour or that hour or that 10 minutes that we're together. And then it's wiped from my mind. So I think that's important too, because that's sort of like spiritual hygiene. I think that's important. Now, when I first started at the shop, this was funny. I noticed that a lot of my coworkers got there like an hour early, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't get the memo. So I asked somebody, why are you all here an hour before we open? And they said, oh, to get our tables ready and to get spirit, And so, they would light candles, and they had certain crystals that they had to have in a certain arrangement, and I thought, oh, who knew? I mean, I didn't bring anything. I just brought it like my cards. And I think, and then I said to myself before the first client came in, I said, Erika, what happens if you lay out these cards and you look at them and you have no idea what they're saying, and you have to say to your sitter, I don't know, what do you see? Because this beats the hell out of me. And I started laughing to myself because I realized that would never happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need all of the trappings. They're lovely, and I own some, but I don't need the trappings of crystal balls and crystal stones and pendulums and amulets and candles in order to do my work. I've done my work on the New York subway. I've done my work on a park bench, because again, I am the magic. The cards are the tool. I do like to light a candle anytime I'm about to engage in this work, if I can. If I can't, I just say to myself, okay, we are now about to engage in sacred work. And that's good enough. Because I think that's another just piece of advice, is to not imbue the cards with more power than they have. Like, people will say things like, oh, my deck doesn't like asking when I ask those kinds of questions. I'm like, what? What? Your deck doesn't like? No. Lenormand, at least in my hands, but I will say the same thing for tarot, does not function in that way. These cards are a gift given to us in service of our higher work. Right? We are the magic. And part of magic is practice and being willing to get feedback. And the feedback in the beginning will be, yeah, no, that's wrong. And you need to be sort of open-hearted and egoless enough to say, this is good information to have. What did I get wrong? What was I not paying attention to?
Mm-hmm.
How can I be better tapped in? And just to take your time and to read free for people. The energy exchange in that case is that, you are learning. They are allowing you to use their lives as a testing ground. To me, that is enough energy exchange. Later on, when you've got, something under your belt, then you can charge.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to point out another thing that you mentioned that I really like and I think is really important, and that people might not kind of realize is a possibility, is this idea of setting these boundaries with whatever it is we work with in our practices. Or, you use the term spirit, but whatever people like to think about it as is, saying like, look, I would like things to kind of like go this way for me. You don't have to always be at like a leaf in the wind of the world. Like, you do have so much agency in your own practice about how these things will play out. So I love that you're pointing that out. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's definitely true.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I also liked what you said about, learning. For me, I think there has been some bear stuff that has come up, what we talked about earlier, but I think for me too, just as an occultist, I'm kind of in love with the symbol of the snake. I work a lot with Hecate, who, the snake is associated with, and, whatever. It's a very basic, classic witchy symbol, right? And I think that for me, like, reading Lenormand I had to really get rid of that attachment to that idea of the snake in terms to
Yes,
read
that's
it
right.
properly, because this has been
That's right.
something that's, yeah, tripped me up in the past, and
So yeah,
something
let
that,
me tell you a word about the snake.
sure.
So generally, remember that these cards come out of a sort of Judeo-Christian
Mhm.
tradition, right? So the snake in Lenormand is not Kundalini energy. It's not, nothing like that.
It's not the Ouroboros there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is generally speaking, it is a problem.
Mhm.
If you're doing a reading on love and the snake pops up, there's a third party probably involved.
Mhm.
Now, that said, there is another meaning for this card, and it doesn't pop up all the time, but it's very important that people know it. And so what I did in my deck is that I asked my artist to have the snake slither through mugwort,
Mhm.
because mugwort is a feminine plant that is used in both divination and healing.
Mhm.
And it is occasionally the case that when the snake pops up, the meaning of it is quite good. It's a clever woman.
Mhm.
So you don't want to just leap to the conclusion that it's a problem, even though I would say probably 7 out of 10 times in your readings, it will be a problem. But I wanted people to remember sometimes it's a clever woman. Now, granted, we live in the day and age when there are people who do think a clever woman is a problem.
I was just about to say, depends on who you ask. That could be the same thing.
Exactly. But they meant it in the most positive sense. So you want to be able to allow each card to
Mhm.
be fluid and limber and relaxed enough that they can take on the meaning they're meant to take in a given reading.
Yeah, I love
And if
that.
they take on that meaning, that means that in that given reading, they won't mean anything else. Any of those other meanings will not be operative. So, for example, if I have the snake and I want to use it as a focus card, I want to use it as a clever woman. When I read it in a spread, that is only ever what it will mean in that particular
Mhm.
spread, right? It won't morph. But cards can morph depending on whether you're reading them in a line horizontally and then you have cards going vertically. And why would the meaning morph? Because the card is now being read with different cards.
Mhm.
You see?
Yeah, yeah. It's a different sentence being spelled out or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, very cool. It's such a cool system, and this is such a cool tool for getting into it and understanding it. And yeah, I really love it. And this has been a fantastic conversation. Is there anything that I haven't asked about that you would like to mention, or do you have any questions that you would like to ask me?
No, I think that, I mean, I hope my goal in the book and in writing the book was that it appeals certainly to tarotists, but that it appealed to the average person who wants to say to themselves, or who does say to themselves, is this stuff really real? Like, is this really a thing?
Mm.
Or is it all nonsense? And, people who want to sort of test out their own divination chops, because I believe everyone has them. It's just a question of whether or not they have developed them, right? So I wanted to
Mm.
write a book that was friendly and kind and clear about a system that I think has gotten too short shrift. It's very well known in Europe. It's well known in South America. It's well known in Russia. It's where else? Australia, but it's not so well known in America. And I think that's because tarot is known, and people think of Lenormand as what somebody referred to it as a basic bitch. And I mean, it is a basic bitch if you use it in a basic way, see spot run. But if you learn to use it to the extent of its capabilities, I think you will be amazed, delighted, comforted, healed, and every other good thing. And you don't have to read it for other people, just to use it in your own life. It is always available. It is always clear and kind and concise in the information it provides.
I love that. Very cool. So, where can listeners find your work?
So I am on Substack. So if you just put my name into the search engine and at Substack, I write there on a weekly basis. A lot of it is social commentary, political commentary, but I do two things. One is that I will just use my own spread to talk about something that's going on. I did something about the recent trial and sentence. You know what I mean?
I do.
The other thing that I do there is I use tarot, Lenormand, and the Adinkra, which is an African aphoristic oracle, and I use them to have a conversation with each other, to do the same kind of thing, to sort of do some social commentary. So I'm there on Substack. I'll, of course, have a website. It's called Lenormand with Erika. So you can find out about me there and my work. And the book is available on Amazon. The deck is available through lapantherstudio.com. And if you'd like a reading from me, if you go to my website, it will let you know how to go about arranging for that. There will be a course going up, and that will be through Agony. Do you know Agony?
I do not.
Okay, I think, what is it called? Well, there will be a course coming up, and there'll be information about it on my website about how to access that. And that's just sort of recorded lessons that can also help you get started if you like to hear somebody's voice and see them and see the cards. It would be a good companion piece to the book, but the book, I think, is the thing. And any deck that you find that you resonate with is also good. Yeah, I would say Substack and my website are the main places.
Very cool. Thank you. Before I let you go, is it okay if I ask a little bit about the other oracle device that you mentioned? Adinkra, is that right?
Adinkra, Adinkra.
Adinkra.
Adinkra. It's an African oracle, so there are just little sayings on there. If you go to my Substack, look at my Substack, because up until recently, there's always been an Adinkra card that acts as kind of punctuation for whatever essay I've just written. Just sort of these pithy truisms. Hold on, let me see if I can. Okay, I've got the deck right here. I'll pull one.
Yay! I love an impromptu divination. Fun, thank you.
Well, there are symbols, and so there's one for it looks like a knot, and it's puffed up arrogance, and it's an injunction to remain humble. Lots of knots, but then the good farmer. It's a symbol of diligence and hard work. So, Sesawu Suban, which is the name of a symbol, the symbols on the card, that says change your attitude. So what I love doing is that every week, I generally don't know what I'm going to write about. And so I let tarot decide the subject. I let Lenormand tell me what to say about it. And then I let Adinkra be the punctuation to end it all.
I love that. That is so fucking cool.
Yeah, just to show people that what they don't realize, which is that these oracles absolutely can talk to each other. But here's a good example. If you're heartsick about something, right? There's a lot of things that you can do that will be helpful. So you can talk to your best friend. You could talk to your mom. You could take a hot bath. You could go to a museum and look at art that you love. You could listen to certain music. Each of those is its own language. A bath is not music, right? Your mother's advice is not a picture in a museum. But each of those things that you do will come together to give you what you need to help you heal or to inform you or whatever it is. So my argument is that a bath knows that it's a bath. A picture knows that it's a picture. Music knows that it's music. Don't get it muddied. Don't mistake tarot for Lenormand or Lenormand for Adinkra, but let each oracle speak its own language. Let them take turns and watch how they work together for good in your life.
I love that. Thank you so much. That was a great parting thought, but if you have any other last words or parting thoughts you'd like to offer, is it also opportunity to do that?
Thank you. I hope that everyone who doesn't know it or has known it and doesn't understand it will look at Lenormand and give it a chance to hold your hand in the way that it's held so many other people's hands, including mine.
I love it. Thank you so much, Erika. This has been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to be interviewed. I've liked it. Thank you very much.
This is the train to Hartford. The next station is Morgan.
All right, thanks so much to Erika Robinson for joining me. Check out the show notes for links to her work. I got myself a copy of Erika's Deck of Hope, the petite version, so I can travel with it. So I know what the secret extra card is. I'm not going to say it here, but you can look it up if you want to, or get a copy of the deck for yourself. It is really cool. It also makes a lot of sense, too. I'm going to share a little bit about another card from the book The Language of Lenormand in a few minutes here. But first, let's do listener mail and shoutouts. Shout out to Ramsey Giannini. It was so cool hearing from you. I hope you're doing well in this wild world of ours. Check out the book Nothing Rhymes with Rats and hear my conversation with Ramsey in episode 53 of the show. Shout out to Catalyst and Shasha. I hope everybody up your way is staying safe. Shout out to JS Groves from Sorcerer's Workbench. You can hear our chat about Dionysus and more in episode 66. I recently had the pleasure of collaborating with JS by posing for some magical photo shoots and conducting some experimental evocation work. I'm still sort of unpacking a lot of the experience of the ceremony that I conducted with Ostenasm Spare, but I can say that it was really cool and powerful, and I certainly felt both the presence and a strong connection with my spiritual ancestor, who I was calling on. I also got to see the Sorcerer's Workbench itself. The workspace is very cool, and picked out a few items, including a very rad set of Gorgon prayer beads and a medallion with the sword and scales of justice. I'll put some images of those on Instagram soon. They're very dope. I also got to go hiking and skinny dipping at Camp Gaia Retreat Center and to meet a few members of the Kansas City Sorceress Arts Collective. It was fucking rad. Thanks so much to JS and to Audrey for the awesome hospitality and the fantastic food and the even better company and conversation. Shout out also to Laura. It was super cool hanging out with you while I was up that way. Thank you for letting me sing at you and for sparring with me and the rest of it. Fuck yeah. Shout out to Laughing Dog, aka Mirth and Woe. I have something for you here. It's a Marcus Aurelius quote. What am I but a little flesh, a little breath, and the thinking part that rules the whole? What do we think about that? I'm not sure, but regardless, cheers. As promised, we're going to be getting into some stuff about simulation hypothesis here. Shout out to everybody who reached out about that topic. And you can hear me, Dave, Amy, Chad, and Chelsea from Unearthing Paranormalcy podcast, and Flood from XV Planet's Paranormal Investigation Team and podcast discuss the topic of simulation hypothesis in episode 84. And this is some of the feedback that I got. So Sorfratter writes, "Thank you for highlighting the unreliability of memory in the discussion of the Mandela effect, as well as calling out the problematic nature of the idea of NPCs. It was a much appreciated moist talent. Thank you. I think the main stumbling block with simulation theory is with reality and the habitual hand-waving that takes place in defining it. Namely, that it is strictly hierarchical, that simulation is necessarily existentially lesser in some undefinable, yet as a core of its definition, way, and equating physicality with realness. It's worth considering whether the NPC-like behavior of others is a result of them treating the allegedly only subject as a non-person. Perhaps non-person character would be a more incisive description, leaving behind the elevating factor of assuming the role of player and bluntly presenting the depersonifying nature of the label of NPC. Worth considering here. What do we think?" And we got a little bit of a different idea of NPCs from an anonymous listener, who writes, "I just listened to the last episode and the topic of NPC characters came up. I remember 2 times when I think I became an NPC. Once when I was getting choked out, on purpose, for kinky reasons, I'm assuming, and could watch myself fall to the ground. And the other time was, and I'm not saying they're necessarily related, but when I was reading Keeping Her Keys, this is a book by Cindy Brennan about Hecate and other stuff. It's very cool. I recommend it. I did some of the things in the book, and I kind of introduced more slop into my physical movement to where I grabbed something I didn't at all mean to grab that had personal significance to me. But I'm sure stuff like this happens all the time. I'm just not aware of it. It's kind of how like everyone thinks they know what a bicycle, or even something simple like an apple, looks like, but if you actually try to recall the details and draw it, you become aware of just how much you can't recall. That extends past the inability to communicate your drawing hand. I think the overconfidence is good, because it would be horrifying to be aware of all of those moments. Alfred North Whitehead said something about this too, and this is from the book Process and Reality. Descartes in his philosophy conceives the thinker as creating the occasional thought. The philosophy of organism inverts the order and conceives the thought as a constituent operation in the creation of the occasional thinker. Alright, fuck yeah, gratitude to everybody who wrote in, whether or not your missive was included in this listener mail segment. Shout out and much love to all of the Pocket Wizards, really proud to be part of such a chill community, fuck yeah, thank you. If you'd like to send me thoughts, questions, comments, or suggestions, or other items for the listener mailbag, you can get me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com, or find me on Instagram at luxoccultpod. If you like the show and you're into what we've got going on here, you can support it on Patreon, which will entitle you to receive a bibliomancy reading from me. Making this show is, of course, a pretty wild amount of work, especially for just one intrepid podcaster, but it means a lot to me to be able to do it. So thank you so much to the people who are making that possible by giving on Patreon or buy me a coffee, and to the people who are supporting the show by spreading the word. Tell your friends, enemies, allies, and magical associates about it, as well as everybody you meet at your next ceremonial potluck, SBOT, or seance you attend. You can also post about it on the social medias, or write a positive review where that is a possibility, or give it stars. All of these things are super helpful, so thank you so much to everybody who is doing this stuff. It really helps and means a lot, thank you. And yes, don't forget to smash the fucking shit out of that follow button so you can get updates when new episodes of the show come out. Alright, very excited for our Wreck This Deck event coming up on the 16th of August. There's a lot of cool things about cards and games in general, which are pretty magical, as we were discussing today in terms of the Lenormand deck and everything. So definitely come and check that out on the Discord. The following Friday, the 23rd, I will be hosting that special chat about magic influence and much more, and we're going to be doing some automatic writing and cut-up stuff as well. It should be pretty fun. So returning to the topic of today's episode and the Lenormand cards, I wanted to share a bit from Erika Robinson's book, The Language of Lenormand, about a card that I've had a complicated and interesting relationship with, and one which this book helped me see and work with in a new light. So this is the Whip, card 11, and this can be about conflict or rough jests. I've also heard it contextualized that, like maybe bullying is also part of that. I've seen it come up as like using power to abuse others in some contexts for me. And it's sometimes shown up in sort of like maybe more kinky ways as well. It's complicated, right? As Erika explained today, it really depends on what the other cards are which are informing it. So Erika writes, the Whip, 11, is also for obvious reasons the card for discipline of both others and the self. Therefore, it is the card representing the athlete as well as the writer. The Whip reminds us that simply wishing for something is not enough. A wish must be yoked to intention and action in order for that wish to come to fruition. An athlete must put time in on the track or field or in the gym consistently, day after day, in order to achieve peak performance. A writer must show up at the yellow legal pad or keyboard according to a regular schedule, whether or not they feel the spark of inspiration. It is going through the motions of showing up and sitting in the chair day after day, the Whip, that novels are written, poetry is crafted, and characters in a play are brought to life. Such discipline does not always feel good, but its consequences are always satisfying and character building. Medicine need not taste good to work, but neither must self-discipline feel bad. Stretching and strengthening the muscles or the mind are always worth the effort. In a spread on the subject, the location of the Whip and the cards that surround it can indicate whether the effort being exerted is insufficient or too much, or just enough. Whip 11 with Bouquet 9, for example, would remind a sitter that their hard work and dedication are being rewarded. Pleasure and pain are not unrelated, as we know. In regard to self-discipline, the Whip 11 can be instructive as to proper dosage for optimal outcome. Fuck yeah, I just love that. So nothing, no tool is inherently good or evil or bad or good or whatever. It often simply comes down to the context or application. Where these lines are so often drawn comes down to consent. When we are the ones holding the whip that helps us discipline ourselves to do the things that we have decided that are important to us, then it can become a powerful tool of transformation. I'm self-aware enough to recognize in myself that part of my interest in the idea of self-discipline has to do with it being something that I just find sort of hot in general, so I wouldn't make the argument necessarily that self-discipline is inherently virtuous. That honestly sounds like propaganda to me. But I perhaps would make the argument that self-discipline can be extremely useful to the magician or witch or magical operant of any stripe. The idea of self-love and self in general being magically potent and being something which can sort of connect one to the greater divinity of the world or the universal force or Kia or whatever is something that comes up a lot in the writing of Austin Osman Spare and has informed a lot of my work and thinking on some of this stuff. Self-love in this context is a sort of conversation, and for me, self-discipline is a part of that magical self-love. So, speaking of self-love, before bidding you all a fond farewell, I will now read the Green Mushroom Project Statement of Resistance, followed by Austin Osman Spare's Prayer of Adoration. As always, much love and much love to everybody participating in the Green Mushroom Project, regardless of what that looks like for you in your practice. Remember to resist. Resist by maintaining sovereignty of the self. Resist by maintaining love of the self. Resist by maintaining fierce loyalty to love and pleasure. Resist with acts of radical kindness. Focus on the path to better times. Fuck yeah. And now, the prayer of adoration. Thou lambent spirit of air, thou hast kindled the sacred fire from dead ashes, so my torch lightens all darkness. Thou hast become the fulcrum of my will. Everlasting in thee, I know not a respite, except in the sensuous impact of flesh there are no meanings. Thou hast awakened me into eternities. Thou makest all things beautiful unto the grotesque. Whom thou succor hath no sterility. I am reborn and reborn into desirous becomings. I have recreated my soul by birthing pleasure. Through thee, my will, desire, belief, and word become the law that carries me into the catastrophic beyond becoming. Thou, the emissary of neither, ever silent watcher, thou hast shown me the new sexualities and all of the mysteries of the threshold. Only thee I adore in my soul and everlasting body. Alpha, Omega, Amen. Alright, fuck yeah. Thanks so much to Erika Robinson for joining me. Check out the Language of Lenormand and Erika's Lenormand of Hope deck. I highly recommend both. Thanks to Chelsea for joining me. I will put a link to her Instagram in the show notes in case you want to check out her very cool work. Thanks so much for all of the help and support from both seen and unseen sources. And most of all, thanks so much to you for listening. Much love. This is Lux Strata reminding you to stay strong and stay fucking curious. Alright, I'm going to leave you all with a strange divinatory exercise that I conducted a couple years back and which has sort of re-emerged again, presenting itself as something that could be fun to explore during this Mercury retrograde season. Regardless of whether it proves to be insightful or confusing, I hope you enjoy. Cheers. It's the 23rd of February at 17:17. This is a divinatory exercise that I'm conducting. I have before me a stack of books from which I will conduct bibliomancy readings in series without stopping. And I'm hoping to get a sort of snapshot of what my work might entail, guidance, some general vibes going forward. see how this goes. Alright, this is from The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene. Of our universe, that is, for explaining the properties of the fundamental forces, but that without knowing exactly which calibre U shape the extra dimensions are curled into, we cannot make any definitive predictions or postulations. Beyond Witten's remark regarding the post-diction of gravity. Why can't we figure out which is the right calibre U shape? Most string theorists blame this on the inadequacy of the theoretical tools currently being used to analyze string theory. As we shall discuss in some detail in Chapter 12, the mathematical framework of string theory is so complicated that physicists have been able to perform only approximate calculations through the formalism known as perturbation theory. Games and Decisions by Duncan Luce and Howard Raffia can be taken the payoff function of a two-person zero-sum game. By the results of section 4.8, we know there exists a value b and optimal strategies x and y. The Big Bang by Joseph Silk. This plot of light intensity versus wavelength displays the spectrum of a quasar at redshift z 2.43. The emission line's peaks are systematically shifted in wavelength toward the red by a factor of z plus 1 equals 3.43. The first two fundamental lines of an atomic hydrogen, Lyman alpha and Lyman beta, are seen at 4170 and 3530 angstroms, respectively. Map and Territory by Eliezer Yudkowsky. This is not a hypothesis about the metal plate. It is not even a proper belief. It is an attempt to guess the teacher's password. Even visualizing the symbols of the diffusion equation, the mass governing heat conduction, doesn't mean you've formed a hypothesis about the metal plate. This is not school. We are not testing your memory to see if you can write down the diffusion equation. This is Bayescraft. We are scoring your anticipations of experience. If you use the diffusion equation by measuring a few points with the thermometer and then trying to predict what the thermometer will say at the next measurement, then that is definitely connected to experience. An Introduction to Cybernetics by W. Ross Ashby, in which E is the set of essential variables, D is the source of disturbance and dangers, such as C, from the rest of the world, and F is the interpolated part, shell, brain, etc., formed by the gene pattern for the protection of E. F may also include such parts of the environment as may similarly be used for E's protection. Burrow for rabbit, shell for hermit crab, pike for pikeman, and sword as defense for swordsman. Quantum Theory by David Bohm tends to oppose localization of the electron. In an atom, the pressure is opposed by the force attracting the electron back into the nucleus. The electron will come into equilibrium where the attraction force balances the effective pressure, and in this way, the mean radius for the lowest quantum state is determined. We can find the point of balance from the condition that the total energy, kinetics plus potential, must be in minimum. The potential energy is of the order of negative E squared over delta X in a hydrogen atom. The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist. Drama, too, can either be completely absorbing or quite alienating, becoming a picture in which we do not participate. In order to absorb, the medium has to be translucent or transparent. We must not focus on the players or the playwright. Shakespeare completely disappears into his work. That's why bad acting can be so embarrassing. It draws our attention to the fact that the actors are acting, and to how they see themselves. They become like critics whose self-preening causes them to obtrude between us and what they claim to illustrate. The implicit becomes explicit, and all is lost. 1,000 Plateaus by Lulu and Philly Gutierrez. Thus, the central power of the state is hierarchical and constitutes a civil service sector. The center is not in the middle, au milieu, but on top, because the only way it can recombine what it isolates is through subordination. Of course, there is a multiplicity of states, no less than of towns, but it is not of the same type of multiplicity. There are as many states as there are vertical cross-sections in a dimension of depth, each separated from the others, whereas a town is inseparable from the horizon network of towns. Each state is a global, not local integration, a redundancy of resonance, not frequency, an operation of the stratification of the territory, not the polarization of the milieu. Britannicus Guide to Genetics. Among sexual organisms, individuals that are able to interbreed among the same species, the biological proprieties of organisms that prevent interbreeding are called reproductive isolating mechanisms, or RIMs. Oaks on different islands, minnows on different rivers, or squirrels on different mountains cannot interbreed because they are physically separated, not necessarily because they are biologically incompatible. Geographic separation, therefore, is not an RIM. A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. There are two versions of the anthropic principle, the weak and the strong. The weak anthropic principle states that a universe is enlarged on infinite space and/or time. The conditions necessary for the development of intelligent life will be met only in certain regions that are limited in space and time. The intelligent beings in these regions should therefore not be surprised if they observe that their locality in the universe satisfies the conditions that are necessary for their existence. It's a bit like a rich person living in a wealthy neighborhood, not seeing any poverty. Alright, and last but not least, the Fractal Geometry of Nature by Benoit Mandelbrot. We further explore my Brownian model of relief as advanced in the preceding chapter. The consequences concerning island areas prove acceptable, but the consequences concerning lakes and cups are not acceptable. To correct this discrepancy, an improved model is put forward. Alright. Fuck yeah, gratitude.
Lux Occult is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.